that idea was out. Chopping it out with a plasma cutter and just using it as a bit of a template.
Cut that out of the VR, so I cut that out. I was going to butcher up the original plate that goes in there this way, which means it's full throttle, which we don't want. Throttle's in, brakes are in, steering's in.
So the next job on the list is the steering column. If you remember from the last video, I wanted to try and fit up this one. Now this one is out of the VP that Dad wrecked years ago. Lengthwise, it's basically the same as what the EH column is. It's actually probably a little bit shorter. But if I went from where the firewall goes in to there, it's actually the same length. So that was what the original plan was. Now, the issues that I ran into with this is that I haven't found in all of Dad's stuff, I haven't found all the uni joints and that goes down to the steering rack. And yeah, so it sort of made this a bit unusable. Now I was thinking, okay, I'll just take the steering column out of the VR and salvage all the parts that I need, but no, they're actually a different column, which probably surprised me a bit. Now, they might be the same column and all these bottom bits might still come off and everything like that, but it's almost a completely different design, what I can see and what I could pull apart. So if you know a better way of pulling these apart, and they can pull apart the VR ones, drop it in the comments below. But anyway, so that idea was out. So then what I did is then where it mounts is there's like a bracket that's in the firewall, which is different from what it is in the EH in the Commodore. So I ended up just chopping it out with a plasma cutter and just using it as a bit of a template. Problem was I spent probably half a day yesterday just trying to work out. I had bits of cardboard, I had all these different things, just trying to make it all work, and it just, it didn't work. In the end, I just sort of jumped in and just gave it a crack, and the end result is this.
How the VR column works is it has this this bracket here which bolts on the the rubber at like the seal, and then it has this with a bearing at this end here, so it's secured there, and then it's obviously secured at the dash. So what I had to do is I had to cut that out of the VR. So I cut that out. I was going to butcher up the original plate that goes in there. So that's the plate that goes in there with the original steering column. But I just couldn't bring myself to it. So I ended up just making up a new piece of plate, just the template out of the new piece of plate. And then, just sort of jumped in and just started cutting and welding it up. And it ended up being in a pretty good spot. Now, ultimately, as I said, I'd probably rather it be an inch or two closer that way. And in the end, I might even drop this down. So where I put this bracket on here, it's sitting up, in perfect line. But I might even just drop it down, say, 10 mil, just to bring that column angle down a bit. But regardless, I can leave it as it is. And then what it means is I'm able to run that ignition switch. And then I'm also able to run the shroud, which means that I can then use the indicator stalk, which has got the cruise control on it. And then I can also use the wipers. And what it means is that if I want to, I can then fill in all of these original holes. But then it might start losing the original look of the EH. So I don't know if I'm going to do that yet or not. I might just leave the switches in there, with nothing on them. But I don't know. I'll make that decision as I get closer. But pretty happy with how that turned out. So it's pretty cool.
So the end result I'm actually pretty stoked with. I didn't actually record anything yesterday while I was doing it because, as I said, most of the time was just me working out what it looked like and, you know, trying to make things work and everything like that. But yeah, by the time I'd sort of worked it out and go, oh yeah, that's actually a good idea, I was already pretty much finished at it anyway, so there was sort of no point to record anything. But I guess the end result now you can sort of see is that, yeah, I'm able to easily move the steering column in and out, and the position is actually not too bad. Like it's probably a bit close to me. I'd probably like it probably an inch or two, you know, closer to the dash. But at the end of the day, I can just move the seating position and everything anyway. So, yeah, pretty stoked with that. So the next job on the list was to do the throttle pedal. Now, this is obviously the throttle pedal out of the VP that Dad wrecked. So they bolt in, obviously, to the firewall there, the throttle cable goes in, and then, you know, in order to, so it's not at full throttle the whole time, there's a spring on here as well, so it always springs back to take the throttle position all the way back to closed. Now, my thought is, when it fits up into the under the car there, obviously that doesn't work, so I can't use that in the position it's in because the brake pedal will be right there, and there's nothing flat to mount it to or anything like that. But what I did look at is that the pin here that's actually welded to the pedal itself, I could actually take that off and put it that side, and then just work out some form of mount to go on that. Now, if we fast forward in time, I've actually just done it all. So I didn't record while I was doing it because it probably took me about, I don't know, 4 hours, I guess, of just thinking and then, okay, how do I play around with this and everything like that. So let's fast forward to the final product. So what I end up doing is I end up chopping the top of that off, but let's have a look at the rest of it. So as you can see, the original throttle pedal, the pins on this side. So what I've done is I have chopped off, or chopped that off, unpicked the weld on that, welded it on the other side. Now the bit that probably took, I guess, the most amount of time is the way that the spring operates, right? So see how the spring comes down here, wraps around, and then loops around that little pin there. That's to get it to go flat, so it springs back flat. Now, because I've moved that around, I actually kept the pin in the same spot. But what it meant is the spring wrapped around this way, and then therefore the return part was this way, which means it's full throttle, which we don't want. So I ended up having to drill a hole, and so I drilled a hole, as you can see, I drilled a hole basically in line with that, so same distance in that. But then what it meant is that there wasn't enough tension on the spring to put it back to full throttle. So I ended up mounting it all up and then seeing, just by holding the spring, to sort of see exactly where I needed to be. And so it ended up being about a quarter turn away. And then that gives me that now. So if I now do that, it all returns back to where it's meant to be. So there's that same sort of tension that's on the spring is on the spring the whole time now. So that's good. So then, as I said, I cut the top of that existing mount off and then put it back on, so that's all the same. And then what I did is I made up just a bracket, which I haven't finished putting in finally yet. I'm just going to chop these bits off and just leave that tab there, and then I'll bolt that in, and I'm probably going to put another tab up the top here in that as well. But effectively that bolts in first, so that'll bolt in there, then this will bolt to that, which that makes that nice and secure. So as you can see, there's that tiny little bit of movement that's still there. Put a little tab on that and bolt it to that, and then that'll get rid of all that, so that'll be fine. And then the other thing that I had to do is put that is put that little rubber stopper there. So once you go back, you put that little rubber stopper in there. So I've just made like a little tab up to go to that. And then as you can see, the throttle cable is now in line with where the throttle hole is. So that all works nicely. The only thing I'll have to probably do is I might just heat this up and then just bend that in slightly, because it's slightly off center. You probably wouldn't even be able to tell, but I can tell. So I'll just go off a little bit that way and just bend that slightly that way, and then that's done. So throttle's in, brakes are in, steering's in, so it's all getting there. So the next job I want to do is now the hood release. Now what's funny is that as much as things change, they stay the same on these cars. So the hood release cable that I've got for the EH is it's like an old school sort of thing. It runs down the side of the engine bay and then out to the hood release. What's interesting is I've actually taken the one out of the Commodore because it's much more, it's a much more modern handle. The length of the actual cable is exactly the same. So it all fits up nicely as well. And what it means is that I can then use the nicer handle, like the more modern handle, and I can make up a nice little bracket for it. So that's what I'm about to do now. As you can see, the one out of the Commodore, it goes in, and you know, yeah, I think it looks much nicer, much more modern anyway. And yeah, you've got to make up a bracket because that basically pulls out and pushes in. So I just basically made up that bracket there and bolted in, and Bob's your uncle. Just drill a hole in the firewall and off you go. Yeah, another job done.